Okay. Where are you, Rick? Where's Rick? There you go.
20 seconds.
Oh.
2.
All right, don't look now, but we're going to pick a jury. We're going to pick a jury in a celebrity case. The victim was a woman who happened to be a television anchor person. And the man accused of killing her in a sniper shooting was her husband. And you know what else? We got us a guy who's going to help us pick the jury. May I ask you to step forward here? Rick Fuentes, Ph.D. Dr. Fuentes is Managing Director of Litigation Sciences. That's a euphemism to say that you can look at people and you can have a sense, you bring an educated strategy to choosing a juror on behalf of usually a defendant. Isn't that so?
That's correct.
Okay. So we've got a man in this case who is accused of killing his wife. They have 2 very small children. Let me just run out here. We've numbered the whole audience here to pick. How about her? Would you mind standing?
First blush, I would say no. Maybe identifying with the victim, young female.
Aha. So she's not going to give a break to the husband.
She may be a little tough on the husband.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes. Here we go. What do you think?
I would say, again, at first blush, no. First blush, no. It looks like he may be somebody that that may be out to strike against somebody.
Why? Is it because he's black?
No, no. Young males. Young males.
You don't want young males regardless of color?
I wouldn't want young people, young males or young females.
Let me tell you why I'd pick him, and you'll tell me why I'm stupid and not doing this kind of work. Here is a minority in America who has no doubt either himself or knows somebody who's been roughed up by the establishment, whether it be the judicial system or the cops, and so he would lean in favor of a male defendant. Take him.
Well, I don't have enough information right now to make a judge decision, so he would be high risk for me.
All
That's
right.
another information I'd have to
All
learn
right,
about.
we're going to find somebody. May I ask you to stand, please? Now, don't do it just for us. I want you to tell us. I realize this is superficial, and you're going to be a lot more scientific when you work for clients at, I'm sure, a very handsome fee. But how about number 19 here?
I like just what I see in that he is somewhat similar to my client, the defendant. He's a white male, probably about the same age as the defendant.
So this guy, then, maybe.
There's some identification possibilities there, maybe.
All right. May I ask you to stand, please? Prospective juror 138.
Again, I like her because of the age category. on the limited information I'm going, I think she would pass the first muster, if you will.
Now, this is a male defendant, and he is accused of shooting his wife.
Right.
I would see this woman as a traditional family. You know.
I don't know anything about her family. I don't know if she's married, if she has kids or anything like that. But at this point, she might be a little less punitive, if you will. Might be a little bit more open-minded. She's been through a lot.
So she may have to say goodbye to her family for a couple of weeks. Huh?
All right.
You might choose her then. All right. Thank you. Yes, sir. How about this young man?
He again looks like he could have some leadership characteristics, and Phil, I would just want to be sure that he would be somebody that would be fair and open-minded, and I would want to find out a little bit more.
Well, no, you don't. You want to make sure you get somebody who's biased in favor of your client.
That's not necessarily true. We would want somebody who's going to be fair and open-minded and hear the evidence, certainly.
Yes, 71.
Yeah, I think so. Again, similar to this lady, somebody a little bit older. She looks like she could be fair.
Yeah.
A little bit. She's
not a little bit older, she's a little bit better, but let's understand that. But I don't think we insult anybody to say we don't have a 20-something person here. We have a middle-aged person.
Right.
And what I'm hearing you say, incidentally, take a picture. Some guy came to the show today and we said, would you mind if we charged you with murder? And we want to thank Danny Clark for agreeing to sit in for us. Danny, you're 37 years old. You're from Augusta, Georgia. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you're wearing the wrong clothes in the courtroom. Let's start with that, huh?
Yes, sir.
So his attorney would likely not allow him to wear a T-shirt into the courtroom.
No, he would dress him up a little bit more.
But here's what I hear you saying, Dr. Fuentes, sir,
yes,
that you are looking for middle-aged women. Preferably white women?
Right now, what I'm looking for are people that have a number of different life experiences. The younger people don't have that. I have no other information except the observable demographics that I can see. And so really what I'm doing here is more of a deselection than a selection. You see, I'm eliminating high-risk people versus selecting the people that would be good. I don't know because I haven't heard anything about anybody yet.
Right. You're going to say no again to a young man like this, then, aren't
Yes.
you? Can I have just your reasoning now on this? What's here's a guy.
Strictly the demographic profiles. He looks like he could be a very fair gentleman, as all the other folks do, but I haven't heard anything and I don't know anything about it.
No, but I mean, isn't he more likely to identify with someone of the defendant's age?
I think if you would ask me if I would rather have a male or a female, I would rather have a male, obviously. But again, I would be looking to stay away from young people generally, absent other information.
Do you see anybody else, just by eyeball here, that you would welcome? How about we're looking for some gray heads on this jury. Do you mind? You know, he doesn't want it.
Okay.
He doesn't want the job. But would you be attracted to a gray-headed male?
Sure.
You would?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, where have I learned that here's what I thought. I thought you preferred women over men as jurors, generally speaking, all other things being equal. Is that not true?
There are no demographic characteristics out there that you can look at universally that would apply to somebody who would be for the defendant or for the plaintiff or for a prosecution or a defendant.
Right.
So what I'm saying is it's very difficult when you have just observable information to deal with.
In order for us to try this case on this program, we've asked the following people to participate, including you, Dr. Fuentes. I can ask you to take your seat there at the defense table. Defending our a person on trial here is Stephen Murphy. Attorney at law Murphy is a practicing Brooklyn lawyer who has been involved as a defense lawyer in the racially charged Howard Beach and Bensonhurst trials. Here's an attorney who knows what the heat is like and probably shares or at least empathizes with what's happening to the O.J. Simpson defense team, not to mention the people's lawyers as well. Juries need to see him as the defense and not the defendant. Explain that, Mr. Murphy. You want the jurors, first of all, you want the jurors to like you.
Of course, that's a necessity, because just about in every major trial, you're going to have a situation where things could be interpreted against the defendant, or they could be completely innocuous. It's like O.J. Simpson, perfect. O.J.'s already the defendant as soon as the case starts.
Yeah.
O.J. gets in his car, goes for a ride, and what's the determination? He's trying to escape. Why? They've made him the defendant.
Right.
Now, if the jury likes you, they will interpret things in your favor. If they don't like you...
When you say you mean you, the lawyer?
Meaning myself, meaning the defendant. Give me a defendant who gets up there and gets everything wrong.
Right.
All right? And he's likable. The jury will find an excuse for him.
Right.
He's a likable guy.
Well, but you wouldn't let him wear this in the courtroom,
No,
would you?
of course not.
You'd have him all dressed up in a Sunday suit.
Sure, I'd have him all dressed up.
We are likewise grateful to Judge Jerome Becker, a real honest-to-goodness judge who happens to be retired. Judges retire as young men in this neighborhood. You are a former criminal court judge in New York City, and you also served as family court judge and special DA in Brooklyn, so you've worked at least two sides of the aisle. Have you ever been a defense attorney?
No, I've not represented.
So you prosecuted and you served on the bench?
Yes, I have an objective viewpoint.
Yes, and you are also involved in voir dire. So when the jury is being chosen, you keep your eye on the lawyers and their questions. There are some that are out of bounds, then some that are not.
I'm the ringmaster.
I see. Yes, we do have a people's lawyer, and we want to thank Jeffrey Orlando for agreeing to be the prosecution for us. 13 years, Westchester County Assistant DA. You prosecuted the Stouffer Hotel fire, a real tragedy, arson that killed 26 people. You also were involved in the Gulliver's Tavern fire, a mass murder trial in which 24 were killed. So you have been around as well, and we thank you for agreeing to play this role for us. Laura Bravetti joins us. We've asked Attorney at Law Bravetti to be in our audience because, among other things, we want somebody on the outside of the courtroom looking in to make sure that we get a totally objective look here. Among other things, Ms. Bravetti believes that voir dire is the most important part of the trial. Where are you? Is that so? Did you say that?
Well, yes, absolutely.
Choosing the jury can be more important than the trial itself.
Absolutely.
I assume you agreed with some of the things that Dr. Fuentes was saying at the beginning of our program and disagree with others.
That's right. I agree and disagree.
Yeah. Wouldn't you rather have a woman as a juror than a man?
It depends on the case, not in this case.
In this case, you'd rather have a what?
I'd rather have a middle-aged man.
And you'd rather have a middle-aged white man, I assume.
I
don't
think
know.
so, yes.
You would?
Yeah.
Okay. Also joining us is Brendan Keefe, who's a television reporter in Florida, but at the time of a very, very complicated and emotionally charged story in Michigan, we had a murder here which was significant, and that's the murder we're going to talk about on today's program. We have a dead mother, 2 surviving very small children, and it wasn't until a year after the murder that the husband was arrested. And we'll show you that husband. He looks a little bit like the man we've asked to be our defendant
Similar.
today.
He has hair.
Right. Now, here are 12 jurors prospective jurors that we have chosen. And what we will demonstrate for you on today's program is the process of voir dire.
To speak the truth.
To speak the truth. Okay. The idea is to pick a jury with the combating advocacy forces of both the people as well as the defense. And we'll begin that process when we come back in just a moment. All right, Brendan Keefe, you, at the time of this murder, which occurred in February of 1991, were a reporter for...
Yes, WWMT, Channel 3 in Battle Creek, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids.
The murder took place in Marshall, Michigan.
That's right.
A not altogether tiny community near Battle Creek.
Yes.
All right. I want to show the audience the picture of the deceased and the family. First of all, who is the deceased, Brendan?
The deceased is Diane King. Diane Newton King. The family prefers that she go as Diane Newton, being the victim of murder.
A morning television anchor person.
That's right, for the ABC affiliate there in the Grand
She's a
Rapids.
Native American. Her husband, obviously Caucasian, and here he is in the courtroom in advance of the trial. Say again, he was arrested 1 year after the murder. His alibi was that he was walking in the woods behind the house at the time of the killing. This was a sniper killing, Brendan. Where did the sniper hide?
Well, the prosecution, the evidence suggests that the sniper hid in a sniper's den, essentially. They lived in a rural area outside of the town of Marshall, and there was a barn across from their house, directly across their driveway. There was a barn door in the second story. They found that barn door open and some shell casings up there to suggest that the shooter fired 2 shots from that location.
And the body then, the autopsy showed a bullet wound where?
They believe the first bullet wound came actually from the sniper's nest and entered the heart, I believe the left ventricle, and they believe that was the fatal shot. The second shot then they believe from the ground level, sort of a finishing off shot that was fired into the abdomen.
Where were the children at the time of the shooting?
Well, the children were in the vehicle.
She had just returned from her mother's house.
That's right, that's right.
They were strapped into the car.
That's right.
She had just got out of the car in the driveway of her own home, which was a rural home with... and his alibi was that he was walking around in the back. Isn't that right? I see. The prosecution will present its case in a moment, but I think we can sketch it out here before we choose a jury. The prosecution is going to argue that she wanted to quit her job as a morning anchor person in order to raise her children. And he was upset by this. He had only a part-time job as a criminal investigator.
He was a criminal instructor. He instructed criminology at a local university, Western Michigan University.
So law enforcement was his particular...
Also a former police officer from Pontiac, Michigan, so he did know the law.
And everybody in Marshall and Battle Creek and environs had an opinion about this murder?
This was the talk of the town, no question, on and off the air.
So finding a jury was quite a challenge for both the people as well as the defense?
No question.
All right, let's start this process. Here are 12 people who may or may not, any one of whom can be chosen. If you can't get them out of here, we'll find some others. Your Honor, who starts voir dire?
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're going to be questioned now by the district attorney and the defense attorney to determine whether or not you can be fair and open-minded and serve as a juror. Just keep in mind that the burden of proof is on the prosecutor. He has to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. With that, the prosecution will begin the questioning, the voir dire of each of you. Mr. Orlando.
Your Honor, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Orlando. The district attorney has assigned this case to me to prosecute on behalf of the people, and this is the first of 3 opportunities that we attorneys have to address you. There's an opening statement that will follow. There's a closing argument that will follow. However, this, most importantly, is the only opportunity that you will have to answer us back. And we ask you to go against the grain of human nature and actually volunteer information. And that's not easy, but we need to know how you think. And as prosecutor, we have the burden of proof. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt must be presented and will be presented in this case. And we'd like you to keep that in mind. Now, this case has received massive publicity, and this case will last a very long time. So there are 2 initial problems that we must address, not necessarily out here in the open arena. Number 1, have you heard or read about this case? Have you been exposed to the media? If you have, that doesn't exclude you automatically. What would exclude you from being on the jury was, how has what you have heard affected you? Have you already formed an opinion? Do you already think he's guilty? Do you already think he's not guilty? Just having read it, it's not your fault. You didn't know you were going to be called in here as jurors. So we need to ask you that question first. And then secondly, hardship. It has to be a true hardship. Is serving on a jury more than the normal 2-week period, perhaps 2 months here, as this case may last that long, is our estimate. Would that create a hardship on you? Now, if you work for IBM and you tell us that IBM can't do without me, if that's your hardship, that's not going to be a valid excuse. Okay, it has to be you personally, a hardship. Now, do any of you fall into that category where you've either read or heard a great deal about this case, or would it be a tremendous hardship for you to serve on a lengthy case?
May I interrupt for just a moment, Mr. Orlando, to ask His Honor, are these people entitled to know whether they're going to be sequestered at this moment in the trial?
No, not at this particular point. We haven't determined whether or not they've been exposed to the media and have some bias that could affect the case.
I see. All right, for the sake of our mock voir dire here, let us assume that most of these people have heard of this case. As evidence, Brendan has already established this was a high-profile case in the community in which it happened, Marshall, Michigan. So let's grant that. Most know. And this is the first time that they've met the prosecution. Do you ask your questions now?
Hey, Phil, what would happen procedurally at this point? It would be foolish for us to ask them in front of everyone else, what have you heard about, what have you read about? Because then that would poison the rest of the panel.
Right.
And also their excuses as to why they can't serve hardship-wise. If one person used an excuse and it worked, then everybody else would know how to get off the jury.
So how then does the court get...
We do it in the back room.
Oh, I see. So I see. In chambers or...
They would raise their hands, whoever falls
And then
into
you go out of the courtroom and they say, look, my mother's sick.
One at a time, we go in the back room, the judge, the defendant, the defense attorney, the court reporter, and the prosecutor, and we ask questions individually of each juror to see just those first 2 topics, hardship and publicity.
Let me just try this. Is there anybody here, if this were real, that feels that you would really be significantly, personally inconvenienced if you were chosen to serve on this jury? Well, my dear. Very good. All right. Well, so they've passed the first hurdle.
We're over that hurdle.
All right. Now, do you continue, or when does the defense get in to charm these folks?
Well, in the back room, both the defense and the prosecution would be able to participate in the questioning. The judge would make the final ruling, either would accept their excuse or not.
Let's accept then that there's no personal hardship obtaining to any of these members. Now what happens? Do you continue to question, or when does the defense get in here?
Oh, I'll get my turn.
You will. All right.
Yeah. We would now go back to the regular courtroom and to the normal, regular voir dire, where the routine questions
May I ask this young man to stand?
Surely.
All right. You're potential juror number 87. The people's lawyer, the prosecution, would want to ask this young man what?
We have your biographical information on the questionnaire, so the routine questions we know about. What I would like to know from you initially is, does the nature of this case, the fact that it's a murder case, does that disturb you to the extent where you would not want to serve on this jury? The mere nature of the case?
No, not particularly.
Okay. Would you have any problem saying guilty if the evidence proves he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt?
As long as it was just as that.
Okay.
As long as
would
it
you
proven
go
guilty.
with the credible evidence in the case?
Yes.
Now, that might be a very disturbing decision that you might have to make. It might be an unpleasant task that we're asking you to perform. Would you be able to do that? In spite of it being unpleasant, would you be able to say guilty if indeed he's guilty?
If I feel that the evidence moved me to feel that he was guilty, yes,
Have you ever been on a jury before?
once.
Okay. You realize there's no requirement that there's no jury school we send people to.
True.
Okay. What we're asking you to bring with you to the courtroom every day is your common sense. Okay. Has everyone here brought their common sense with them today?
Yes, they have.
Okay. we want you to leave home. We want you to leave home your passions and your prejudices, but we want you to bring your common sense to
Right.
this courtroom every day.
Now, Mr. Orlando, do you then, when does defense get to question him?
I get to question all of the jurors first, and when I'm completely finished,
I see.
the
Do you
baton
make
is-
in other words, you don't announce your decision as to whether
No,
he's acceptable.
no,
I
no.
see. All right, let's try one more. All right. May I ask you to stand, please? Not much time, Mr. Orlando, so if you'd expedite this for us.
Does the nature of this case disturb you, ma'am?
No.
Okay, would there be any problem looking that defendant in the eye and saying guilty if indeed the evidence proves that beyond a reasonable doubt?
No, I don't believe
Okay.
so.
Is there any experience in your past life whereby you could say to us right now, I don't have an open mind, I can't be fair and impartial?
No, as a matter of fact, before I thought you must come with an open mind. Those were my thoughts.
Okay, and you brought your common sense with you, and you
Yes, I
apply it
have
to
a lot
everything
of
you
it.
hear and see? Now, being a juror is not very different than what you do every day. You're constantly presented with sets of facts, and you have to make decisions. If two little children tell you he did it, you have to figure out who's at fault. Here, it's a little bit different. We ask you to make decisions based on the facts presented, but once in a while, a judge is going to tell you to disregard what you've heard, perhaps an improper question. Would you be able to make that mental gymnastic and disregard what you heard, but the judge is now telling you to not consider it as evidence and not use it in this case?
I believe so because I was an educator and I had a lot of little boys who said this and that.
Okay.
And
so you've been on a jury for a long, long time.
a long
Yes.
time.
Okay.
And all men are little boys grown up.
Well, you might want to put that in your computer. Yes, ma'am.
Let's take the toys away from the boys.
That's yes, let's do. Now we'll find out whether your ad-libs go for or against your service on the jury. I'm not sure. We'll meet the defense and have them make their own inquiries when we come back in just a moment. Stephen Murphy, you represent the defendant, a man who taught criminal issues part-time at a community college in Michigan, is on trial for the murder of his wife. They were the parents of two very small children. We have heard Mr. Orlando, the people's lawyer, during voir dire, question this young man as a prospective juror. Now it's Stephen Murphy's turn. Let's not forget, he represents a man who was on trial for his life. The stakes are no less than that. This is murder one. Mr. Murphy, sir.
Hi, Mr. Wilkes. Obviously, everybody's read about this in the paper. You've read about it, haven't you? You haven't read anything about this?
No, I haven't.
All right, do you know people have read about it?
No, not that I know
And have
of.
you talked to anybody about the case?
No, I haven't.
So you have no opinion whatsoever?
Not at this particular point, no.
How about you, Mrs. Kessler?
May I ask you
Have you've read about the case, haven't you?
Are you talking?
No, you're
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler. Here's Mrs. Kessler.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're
Number
Mrs.
10
Kessler.
is Mrs.
Well, I wanted you.
Kessler.
All right, fine. You can ask her.
How about you, Mrs. Kessler?
I have never heard about the case, no.
No. Well, for the purposes of the program, you have to hear about the case.
You have to accept that. We've already had the reporters.
Yes.
Everybody in town has heard about it. So
Heard about
let's
it.
start there. Go
All
ahead.
right,
Go
I
for it.
apologize.
Well, did you formulate any opinion when you heard about it?
I thought about it.
You had a reaction to it, right?
Yes, I thought about the pros
Can you
and
tell
cons.
me what the reaction was? Not what you heard, but what the reaction was. Were you like flabbergasted? Did you feel, oh, he must have done it, I read it in the papers?
I considered it from both sides. I thought, first of all, he was involved in law enforcement. That might make him a more aggressive personality, because aggressive personalities are attracted to law. However, she was an anchor woman.
Okay, yeah. All right, well, let me ask you this. Do you understand that when you first read about it, that's what the police are saying, that's what the prosecutor's saying. Do you understand that his part of the story never gets heard in the papers initially. Do you understand that? That everything that's being said, you're being manipulated to think a certain way by the police and the prosecution. Just like in the Simpson trial. Simpson was automatically the defendant. Simpson's automatically guilty in everyone's opinion because everyone that's talking is the prosecution saying this, the police are leaking information.
This is beyond the bounds of propriety.
The objection
I
is
didn't
sustained,
complete
Mr.
what I was
Murphy.
going to say. The fact is
Jury
she's...
10,
The court, for a moment.
Just listen to the questions he's asking. Mr. Murphy, try to just ask a few more questions and move on to the next juror.
Do you feel that, somewhere along the line that it's unfair that stories are leaked to the press to taint a trial?
Absolutely.
Okay, I agree. Now, does everybody else feel that way? Is there anybody that thinks that when they read these stories in the paper that are leaked to the press by the prosecution or the police, that this is to help the defendant?
Assuming the prosecution leaked things to the press,
Well, who else would leak a story that's detrimental to the defendant?
Yes.
This
Your
is
Honor.
This is one of the courtrooms where you can't hold Mr. Murphy in contempt.
There aren't any courtrooms where that
But
happens.
let's understand this. Is this approximately what is happening in Los Angeles in a non-televised drama within the courtroom in jury selection for Simpson?
Probably as aggressive, if not more so, than Mr.
But
Murphy.
I see Mr. Murphy arguing already his client's innocence.
That's the,
Because there's no other time that these
Can he
prospective
do
jurors are
this?
going to hear it.
It's a strategy that's being used out there, and it's an effective strategy that can be used here today. It's a very subjective thing, but I think it's appropriate.
You do? So
Yeah.
you wouldn't
Now-
let him say, if someone leaked on this, you'd let him do this?
I would. Of course, the prosecution is not going to like that.
Mr. Murphy, I would ask you, this young woman makes the point that, if she heard he was in law enforcement or something to do with the law, and yes, she said, those people, they're very, very aggressive. You're not going to take her, Mr.
I'm
Murphy.
very aggressive myself.
Yeah, but would you choose her?
Yeah, I'd take her.
You would?
I'd take her in 10 seconds.
She's already prejudiced against your client. She thinks he's an aggressive
I don't
male.
think she is. I don't think she is. I think that she's indicated that she's going to be fair, and obviously she's going to take a good look at what evidence she hears
Yes.
and what she reads by
Yes.
the fact that she's not swayed
Right, but at
by
this-
the newspaper accounts that the prosecution's propaganda comes
But
out.
at this pace, we're going to have 7 months just to choose the jury. We're never going to get to trial here.
I tell you what, if you let the jurors hear not just the prosecution side of the case,
Right.
but the defense side, so that they can evaluate from a certain way whether or not what they've originally heard has tainted them to the point that they can no longer be fair. Because maybe if their minds are opened up to the idea that there's another side to this whole story here.
Yes. So you're saying you take juror number 10?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler, 2 seconds.
How about juror number 87? Young man.
Jury number 87, if I could question him for a while.
All right, I'll give you a chance. I'll give you a chance to ask him more questions when we come
After the
back in
break?
just a moment. Yes. Attorney at law Murphy, you're on. You are defending a man on trial for his life. In a moment, I'll show you this murder scene. You wanted to make... This is a prospective juror. We heard the people's lawyer question him. Now the defense will.
Mr. Wilkes.
Incidentally, you know he's Mr. Wilkes because
Yes.
you've got the outline on the paper that you have.
As you do in real
Oh,
trials.
that's what I
they
want.
give you
Okay,
the print
but you
out.
know his age, you know what he does for a living, you know
Yes.
whether he's single. Is that right?
That's
Do you know
correct.
whether he has a record?
No, you don't have that information, and usually the defense isn't going to ask him if he's got a record.
Okay, so
Usually
we
the
have
prosecution will
occupation,
ask him that.
age, marital status, and probably whether or not he has a family, huh? Okay, Mr. Who? Wilkes?
Wilkes.
Yes.
Mr. Wilkes, do you believe it's possible that a police officer could get up on the stand and deliberately lie?
Yes, I do.
All right. Do you feel that maybe when people think that God's on their side, that maybe they can excuse whatever they do? In other words, the end justifies the means?
Well,
Some people.
some people, yeah.
Some people, yeah. All I'm asking you to do is keep an open mind that it's possible that since there was no other target of this investigation, and that my client was automatically the target, that maybe when they charged him, targeted him, that now they got to justify this. Do you think that's possible, that that could have happened?
Yes.
Okay, and you keep an open mind to that, all right? How about you, ma'am?
Incidentally, this is a buy right here. You want this guy.
Yeah,
I know
I'll
you
take
do.
him.
Who do you want? Who do you want to talk to?
Number 68.
68. May I ask you to stand, please?
All right, sir. Is there anything that you've heard so far that, let me ask you this. What was your reaction when Phil got done telling you what the case was about? You have any reaction to that?
Young Native American woman, professionally accomplished, an anchor person for the local television station, mother of 2 small children, shot sniper style. Execution style would not be misleading in this case. In her own driveway, after returning from her mother's home in the evening with her children still strapped in the car, she died on the gravel of her own driveway.
Yes, a very unfortunate situation,
Well,
I thought.
do you think it's possible? Let me ask you this. Do you think bigotry exists in this world? Obviously it does.
Obviously.
All right? Do you think somebody could be motivated by racism to accuse somebody of a crime and then to justify what they have done, try to plant evidence or lie, deliberately lie, to convict that person? And that this could be fueled by racist thinking. Do you think that's possible?
That's possible.
All right. Do you promise me that you're not going to close your mind to it? And if you should hear certain things, that you're not going to look for an excuse. In other words, justify what the police officer did. It's a terrible investigation. It's all screwed up. It looks like they planted evidence. That you're going to look, not to say on its face, hey, yeah, that's exactly what it is. But on the other hand, start looking for something to justify it. To say, oh no, the police are wrong, made a mistake. It's not that he's deliberately lying. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, you're going to give the police every benefit of the doubt, when in fact, the defendant is the one that is entitled to the benefit of every reasonable doubt. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Do you think you're the type of person that, if God forbid you were sitting over there, that you'd want on a jury?
I would want to hear both sides of the case and try to come to a conclusion.
Are you a compassionate human being?
Yes.
You give him the same fair trial you'd want if, God forbid, you were there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Now let's, I know his opening argument already. I know. Incidentally, everything he said, you're not going to interrupt, Judge.
No, I'm not.
He's a rubber band. I mean, he's on a waterbed. This attorney at law is all over the place. So you're letting him get away.
He's very clever, and he's doing the right job. He's
All right.
performing correctly.
But every prospective juror has he has telegraphed his strategy here.
Well, what's going to happen next, though, regardless of how he's telegraphed his strategy, is to determine from the prosecution if there is anybody there that he wants excused for cause. He's heard how Mr. Murphy has given a viewpoint which makes some of the jurors sensitive to him.
I see.
Now, he might want to excuse somebody based on cause, or he has a preemptive challenge, which means he can exercise a challenge.
Just because he doesn't like the way the person looks.
He might not like what Mr. Murphy has done, and will show it in another way.
But here is Murphy's opening argument. When we finally, after how many days after days after days, choose the jury, this attorney is going to get up and say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it was 1 year from the time of the murder that this man was arrested. If he's so guilty, what took the cops so long? And now that and you know why he was arrested? Because he was the only one out there that they could possibly point a finger at. They dropped the ball. They didn't find the person who killed this wonderful young mother. And so they went to the nearest person, and that was her husband. Why did it take them a year? And now that they've made this commitment, they don't want to look like fools, and they are prosecuting this not unlike cowboys in the Wild West. I will prove, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that this man did not murder his wife. When we come back in just a moment.
For a transcript of Donahue, send $3 to Journal Graphics, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203. To order a video cassette for only $24.95, just call 1-800-FOR-VIDEO.
We have presented here a very superficial review of how this works, and we can see how laborious and time-consuming this should be. We've already heard the testimony of Laura Bravetti, who makes the point, not unlike a lot of lawyers, that this, in fact, can be more important than the trial itself. Here are potentially the people who will decide whether this man spends the rest of his life in jail. Now, let's look at it from the juror's point of view. You're all proud Americans. You want to serve. You think one of the worst things you can do is turn your back on this process. We either are proud Americans or we're not, and we ought to be available for jury duty. How much do you make as a juror? Do you know? Let me give you some just random sampling. I think we have 5 states here. If you serve on a jury in California, you make $5 a day. If you serve on a jury in New Jersey, you make $5 a day. Don't spend it all in one place. If you, Michigan, 15, we're getting up there. Texas, bless your heart, $30. And Indiana, you drunken sailors, you pay them $50 a day to serve on the jury. And incidentally, God bless Indiana. Isn't that the least these folks are entitled to have? You can see that we'd be here for a long time trying to pick 12 jurors. I would ask Dr. Rick Fuentes, Managing Director of Litigation Sciences, you are the agency that assists in helping defense for a fee choose a jury. May I have your brief comments on the people with whom we've spoken here so far, potential jurors? How about Mr. Wilkes, number 87?
We would like Mr. Wilkes. We liked his responses to our counsel's questionings. I thought there was some good bonding there, and he gave some strong answers that indicated that we would like him.
Right. You're Mrs.
Kessler.
Kessler, yes.
I would recommend that we strike Mrs. Kessler. The first statement that she made when asked what she remembered about the pretrial publicity was the issue about the gentleman being a policeman and that sometimes policemen are aggressive. So she was focusing on that element. We would strike her.
And how would we do here with juror number 120?
We're still unsure about her. We'd need a little bit more questioning.
Yeah, like what did you know about her that you want to know briefly? I'm sorry to be so...
Just a little bit more maybe about what she took away from hearing about the case.
I see.
You know, what was her first takeaway when she heard the description of the case?
She felt terrible about the death of this woman. And she sort of leans, she wonders if her husband didn't do this. After all, he's been arrested. She saw him on the evening news. He was taken to the jail, you know. Now what are you going to do with it?
If those were her answers, we'd strike her.
Well, but I mean, she lives in Marshall, Michigan. And what do you expect her to do? She's a citizen. She's going to see this. All right. Well, you don't have to worry. You just lost $5 a day or whatever it is. Michigan. Yes.
This is our foreman. We like him.
You do?
Oh, yeah, we like him in a big way.
Is that right?
Yeah, we like him in a big way.
No kidding.
He said that he would have to look at both sides of the evidence. He didn't focus on any of the particularly, aggravating aspects of the case or anything like that.
Yeah.
He's a foreman.
Just for the record, you don't choose the foreman. The 12 jurors do.
That's right.
But you're thinking that this, incidentally, what do you know about him? What's his occupation?
The only thing I know about him is that I believe you're retired.
Right.
Yeah.
Is he a professional person?
He is a retired controller.
So you're betting that when they retire, that they just might elect him foreman.
He has some leadership characteristics.
Okay.
And
Who else was on their feet on this one? I guess that's it. Anybody in this audience with? Let me show you the scene of this real murder in Michigan, 1991. Here's the farmhouse at which this young Native American was mother of 2, was quite literally murdered, execution style, by a sniper who, using a high-powered rifle, fired 2 bullets into her body. This is the house. These are 2 children orphaned. And the husband's alibi, as we said, was that he was walking in the backyard at the time. It is 1 year later, and the trial is about to begin. May we see just one more look at number 3? I just want to see the defendant in this case. One of the problems that the defense had in this case is this man in his orange suit and handcuffs looks like public enemy number 1. This is a hairless, menacing-looking white male. What does this do to the jury? We will assume that he does not present himself to the jury in chains and monkey suit.
He's not cuffed, but he would. I'm surprised they have him dressed in that
Well, this
suit
may
there.
be at a prelim.
It
This could be
probably is.
prelim. So
Because they
let's not
definitely
be.
wouldn't have that in trial.
You
That's
would
too
present him in a
prejudicial.
shirt and tie.
Oh, sure.
Yes, and we'll be back to let the rest of these prospective jurors ask their own questions of you in just a moment. You wanted to ask, sir. I think you were rejected. Yes.
Yeah, if the man was arrested after a year, you know, how could he kill his wife in front of his 2 kids?
Well, if you said that during voir dire, I guarantee you'd be able to go and have a beer at the bar. You're not going to be on anybody's jury. Yes. Yes.
I thought the defense attorney's questions were too yes/no oriented. If you wanted to be on the jury, the answer is obvious. Yes, I have an open mind. Why not ask something like, if you had the choice, would you be the defense attorney or the prosecutor? That would let them have a more open-ended answer.
I don't know whether that would pass. Huh? Sure.
Well, basically, I tell you, you can talk all day about we want a completely unbiased jury, but the reality of it is both sides, it's an adversarial proceeding, both sides are looking for an edge somewhere along the line. What you're hoping for is if you're not getting the edge, you're at least getting somebody who is fair and impartial.
How long does this process take, and how much does it cost us as cost the public?
I've picked juries lasting 7-8 weeks.
You mean voir dire lasted?
Just to pick the jury.
How much is that costing us as taxpayers, or how much does it cost?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Isn't there any way to cut this process down?
To give a defendant a fair trial, it's always worth the money. You have to have that mindset.
You wanted that.
Well, my question was, how much extra is it to bring in this?
Very good question. What do you charge?
I mean, who can afford this? Who's paying this bill?
Texaco can afford it. Mobile.
But this guy,
General Electric.
But the guy that is on trial, this policeman...
He's a middle-class man. In fact, he's a part-time guy. And part of the prosecution's presentation will be that he didn't want his wife to quit work, and when she threatened to, he killed her.
So who... Then, I mean, when you come in, what is your...
Sure. Yeah, I'll just say first, all of us in the legal arena do a lot of work on what's called a pro bono basis, which means we don't charge a fee. And we'll take on those kinds of cases. In terms of what the rates are for a jury consultant, it ranges tremendously, anywhere from $800 to $3,000 a day.
And jury selection, if it takes, can take 3, 4, 5. You said you were involved in one, Mr. Orlando, that took
7 weeks just to pick a jury.
Right. And as the judge, the presiding judge, watching this process of choosing a panel of our peers to make a judgment on our defendant here.
Well, you see, that's how it works in most of the state courts. But in the federal court, the federal judge has greater control over the selection of the jury and can shorten the process. And I think what you're going to find today in our state, New York, Chief Judge Kaye is trying to shorten the process by giving more control to the judges so we don't spend that much time. It's valuable, but sometimes 7, 8, 9 weeks seems ridiculous.
Right. Can I dismiss a juror simply because he's black?
If there's a pattern that develops, and the answer is no. But let's assume that one black juror is dismissed for no cause whatsoever.
Yeah.
That might not be challenged. But if you see several blacks being dismissed or excused...
The law allows the judge to say, wait a minute, that's enough of that.
That's correct.
How about women? Can I dismiss a woman?
In terms of race or gender, the judge has that discretion.
When we come back, we will ask the reporter who covered the trial in Marshall, Michigan, of our defendant, what happened in this trial. I will tell you now that the jury deliberated for 3 days. Is that not true? For 3 days. Also appearing and testifying at the trial, if I'm understanding this, were 2 students of the defendant. 2 female students of this defendant who what?
Well, it was suggested there was a relationship, but that was kept out of the trial, that there was some sort of extramarital affairs.
Was the jury exposed to this?
The jury was exposed to this, and that could be the grounds for an appeal, based on most expert...
So they still took the stand and said, I slept with this defendant?
No, they were kept from saying that.
Well, then how did the jury know?
It was suggested in the questioning, and then that questioning was stopped. They were told to ignore those answers.
Oh, I see. Was he found guilty or not guilty? We'll tell you when we come back in just a moment. This is the first time that triplets have been born to 2 different women.
Impossible miracle babies, next Donahue.
Attorney at law Laura Brovetti just briefly Mr. Murphy's inquiry of the defense attorney's inquiry of these juries, this I assume was typical, is it?
Very.
Uh-huh. And it's important, is it not, that the defense counsel be liked by this jury? He cannot be Attila the Hun himself, can he?
He is the defendant in the jury's eyes.
Is that right?
That's right.
So they look upon him as the defendant because, first of all, the defendant may not take the stance and we may never even hear what he said. All right, what happened? Jeffrey, may I ask Brendan Keefe to stand? Huh? Mr. Keefe, you are now a reporter with WJXT-TV in Jacksonville, Florida. You covered this trial, a real trial in Marshall, Michigan, of this defendant shown here in the prison oranges as well as very heavily shackled. He is the man who was accused of the sniper killing of his wife, a very popular local television personality.
Very different than this man sitting right here. You'll notice in that picture, very different. This man has hair. Also, a lot of people pointed out, even after the case, during the case, the man has beady eyes.
Beady eyes. Incidentally, did he testify in his own behalf?
He did not testify in his own behalf. He was found guilty by a jury of 6 women, 6 men.
All white?
Well, no, there were a few minorities, but they were the minority.
And how? And they deliberated for what?
3 days and over part of a weekend. But it was towards the holidays too. That was another question. It was towards Christmas.
Are they hurrying to get home and let's hang
out? Well, a lot of people predicted that.
He was sentenced to what, Mr.
Sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And during his sentencing, made a statement saying this jury basically did a dereliction of duty. He said he could say anything he wanted as his sentencing. He chose to say it was a dereliction of duty. They basically decided that he was guilty until proven innocent instead of innocent until proven guilty. I talked to 2 jurors after that.
Yes.
And both of them did say that he was guilty until proven innocent. They suggested that, you know, he didn't prove that he was innocent. They suggested that in their answers.
I would ask you, Mr. Keefe, do you, as a person who covered the trial, believe that justice was served in this case?
Well, you know, as a journalist, I do have to remain pretty much
but it's
objective.
after the fact now. He's in jail for life.
I would say that he was not proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would suggest there are things that I believe that make him guilty. However, I do not believe he got a fair trial. And I believe there are several instances where he will have an appeal opportunity.
May I ask you to join me in thanking all these participants for a look at voir dire.
Services provided and promotional fees paid by the following: